Welcome to the Occult London podcast. This is a new podcast dedicated to exploring magic, mysticism, the Kabbalah, as well as other topics. If you like the podcast, please write a review and rate us on iTunes, as it will really help us to get this message out there. Also, be sure to visit our website at occultlondon.co.uk, where you can subscribe to the show. If anyone has any questions for me, then I'd love to hear from them, so please do reach out via Facebook or an email. You can find my details on the show notes. Thanks. In today's episode, we are going to be kicking off a new series which will be discussing some elements of astrological magic, its history, the 12 zodiacal signs, and also some elements of sort of astrological thinking and kind of practical ways of working with those particular forces as well. Astrology, as I'm sure most of you know, is a massively complicated subject which takes years of practice and study to master fully. So these episodes are not designed to be a comprehensive how to do astrology or anything like that. It's more of a broad sort of overview of the development of some of the astrological thinking through the ages, looking at some of its history, and also so things like Mesopotamia, ancient Greece, Rome, medieval period right up to the present day, and then also looking at some of the different aspects of the 12 signs, and then also kind of how practically you can apply some of the elements of these things into sort of magical work as well. And in this first series, we're going to be kind of looking mainly at the aspects. So some of the key thinkers and ideas from astrological thought from each period, and also their importance in connection with Hermeticism. As the great Hurrian Sabian sage and scientist Thabit ibn Qurra said in his De Imaginibus, one who studies philosophy and geometry and every other science, but remains ignorant of astrology, will labour in vain, because the more worthwhile geometry and the higher philosophy is the science of astrological magic. And Dion Fortune also wrote about astrology in her book Sane Occultism, saying the following: whether we are conscious of it or not, we are all the time reacting to the zodiacal and planetary influences which are playing upon the earth, and our reaction being determined by the relative proportions of the different elements in our psychic constitution. We need to know not only the general influences affecting mundane conditions, but how we ourselves are likely to be affected by them. And that's Dion Fortune. Although astrology is still considered in many fields to be a pseudoscience that claims to, divine information about human affairs and events on the earth through studying celestial movements and positions. From a magical and a spiritual perspective, it's always been very important. It's meant to date back to at least 2nd millennium BCE. And as we shall see, most likely has its roots in possibly calendrical systems used to predict seasonal changes. Astrology is also very common in most cultures, so from Hindu, Chinese, Mayan through to the West. Western astrology, which is one of the oldest astrological systems still in use, can trace its roots most likely back to Mesopotamia, where it then spread through to Greece, Egypt, Rome, and the Arabic world, and eventually through to Central and Western Europe. And the system that is used today is usually focused on explaining aspects of a person's personality and predicting events in their lives based on the positions of celestial objects. Where does the word come from? So the word astrology comes from the Latin word astrologia, which in turn derives from the Greek word astron, meaning star, and logia, meaning study of. So it's the search for meaning in the sky, but also a search for meaning of ourselves. In our modern age, we are used to being constantly entertained, and there's lots of stimulation going on all the time through media, through TV, the internet. So, to a certain extent, we don't sit outside and look up at the stars. We don't observe nature. We don't find those moments of silence. It's through that observation of nature that astrology would likely have developed. In today's society, we see an orange glow in the sky, where once there would have been a real rich tapestry of stars, planets and galaxies clearly visible to us on Earth. And if you ever go out of the city, if you get the chance, I'm sure some of you might already live out in the countryside. But if you go out of the big cities, out of the urban areas to the quiet places, it's incredible how bright and powerful the stars appear, particularly if it's during the dark moon. And ancient human beings, our ancestors, most likely would have sat and looked up in awe at that sky, at the sun, the moon and the stars. They would have sat and looked up and possibly started observing the position of the stars until one night, they noticed that they moved. Where did that particular star go? And that may be the beginnings of this sort of study. Before the 17th century, the two words astrology and astronomy were likely interchangeable, and practitioners would have experienced in both disciplines. It's not 100% clear the actual origin of astrology, but it's generally considered that there are really sort of 4 stages in its development, and these are referred to in an excellent book, Nicholas Campion, History of Western Astrology, if you want to take more ideas further. In that text, Campion identifies 4 periods of history from an astrological point of view. So you get the pre-literate astrology, which predates recorded history. There is ancient astrology from about 2000 BC to around 200 AD. Traditional astrology from about the 2nd century AD to 17th century. And then modern astrology, which is from 1700s to the present. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, then do stay tuned. And thank you very much. Hope you're enjoying the podcast.